What up, y'all? This is Patrick Hayes, and in this video I want to talk about negative entities. Those entities that come in and manipulate you and mess with you. I want to talk about how to identify these beings, how to understand how they get inside of you and manipulate you, and also understand some of the tactics that they use to manipulate your thinking and manipulate your behavior. Then I also want to talk about some really good techniques that we can use for being able to come back into our own sovereignty and then intentionally connect with positive beings that are more in our greater interest. Okay, so one of the things to know first about negative beings is how they originally start getting into our field and manipulating us. Now, one of the ways that it very commonly happens is that people become traumatized at a really young age. Now, in the earlier ages, up through age, I think it's 14, we're developing different chakra centers, right? So we're developing our root chakra, and the three that actually fully develop in our energy body naturally without extra effort are the three lower chakras. So that's the root chakra, the sacral chakra, and then the solar plexus chakra. And they're all associated with different things. I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with chakras. So what happens is during the developmental stage that one of our chakras, one of these three lower chakras, is developing, if we get severely traumatized during one of those stages, then what happens is the energetic field that protects that chakra can get a tear in it. And that tear can be like an open doorway for beings to come and infiltrate our field. It becomes a really tricky hole to get out of because you start thinking back, well, like I've always had this problem. I've always been upset like this, or I've always, had these negative emotional spirals. Well, maybe that wasn't you. Maybe it actually was you were traumatized at a young age, and due to that trauma, you started getting manipulated at a young age, and so then you just started thinking that's just the way I am. And a lot of people get stuck in this cycle. Well, that's just the way I am. I've always been that way. A good thing to understand is that if it's a super negative emotion that's destructive to the world, it's not actually you, right? You maybe have taken on those qualities, you maybe have identified with those qualities, but that's not actually you. The true you is that part of you that wants to feel positive experiences, that wants to feel love and bliss, that wants to be a beautiful person. That's truly you, and that's why that feels right. If it feels destructive and bad, even though you might identify with it mentally, that's not actually you, and you know it's not you because it feels terrible. So that's the first step, identifying what's you and what isn't you. Now, this is not an excuse to not take responsibility. Even though another being might be manipulating you in a way to give you negative emotions, that doesn't mean you don't need to take responsibility for your own emotions. In fact, it's the taking responsibility for your emotions that will give you the ability to claim your own sovereignty. But knowing that it's not always you can actually give you a lot of wiggle room there because you don't need to identify with that behavior as you anymore. Now, another way that beings can find their way in is just simply through harmonic resonance. If you are having a lot of negative thoughts, then you're starting to invite in beings that are of that same frequency. Because conversely, if you're having positive thoughts, you're inviting in beings that are of that vibration. Basically, you're like an antenna, and you're tuned in to all sorts of different dimensions all the time. But the harmonic frequency of your vibe is what basically like tunes the radio antenna. So when you're vibing at a low vibe, you're tuning in to all sorts of different beings at a low vibe. So if you're having repetitive negative thoughts, then you're going to be tuning in to negative beings that might start influencing your thinking also. Because even if you're somebody that has sealed all their first three chakras and you've been a relatively balanced person your entire life, if you start doing something like, I don't know, listening to a certain kind of music over and over and over that's of a certain vibration that's really, really low, or you start going to, horror movies over and over and over and getting scared over and over and over, eventually what happens is you break down that protection that is naturally, inborn to you. And you start opening yourself up to different influences. And, it's really simple. It's like, what you vibe like is what you receive. It's like, if you're in a bad mood, you have bad thoughts. Well, there's actually beings that are associated with that also. And a lot of inspiration, a lot of thoughts and ideas come from beings outside of us. So being hyper aware of where you're vibrating is one of the major tools for being able to basically keep your own sovereignty. Because you realize that if you're vibrating low, if you're in a negative space, that you can't trust the thoughts that are coming in. They're very likely not your own. They're very likely beings that are trying to convince you to go along down this string line of thinking and take you in a direction that will ultimately be detrimental. Because see, a lot of these beings like to feed off of human energy. A lot of them have a lot of different, agendas, but a lot of them like to feed off of human energy. So how do they feed off of human energy? Well, they convince you to give your energy up. And how do you give your energy up? By restricting your energy. That restriction of energy, like where you're upset or you're angry or you're judgmental, when you do that, you restrict your energy. You actually feel your body do this. You tensify. You tense in your muscles. And in that tension, your life force that flows through kind of like an electrical current, your life force can't make it through the resistance, so it spills out. And that extra life force spills out around your energy field, and these beings can just eat that energy up, and they can live off of your life force energy. They can also do things where they can find specific people that might have, say, a knack for their verbal acuity, and they might start manipulating these beings to be extremely insulting to other people. Not so much in a direct way to feed so much off their energy, but they might use these beings to insult other people in their environment. See, so it gets tricky. It can be entire energy dynamics. This is not always a one-on-one thing. Sometimes beings can work together to have, a couple always fighting by finding whichever one is in their weak spot and then infiltrating that weak person and then breaking the other person down so that they're fighting. So it gets quite complicated, and you can probably run with this idea and imagine all the different things that can be done. But a thing to be aware of, like I said, is where are you vibrating at, right? If you're having negative vibrations, you might be getting infiltrated through your thoughts and even through energetic vibrational frequencies from different beings. But basically, you just want to be aware of your energy. Now, I'm going to take a little bit deeper here because there's another angle of how these beings can come at you that's important to be aware of. And this is, you can think of it as what you would call good is balanced. Meaning that everything has different polarities to it. Meaning that what you could say a good quality is really just a balanced quality. So for instance, like being protective over your child. Being protective over your child is a good thing. But if you become overprotective, then you're like a tyrant that like doesn't let your child do anything, and that's like not good. And if you're underprotective, then your child is in danger. So you gotta find that happy balance. And it's very much like that. When you're making good decisions, when you're in alignment, you're in balance. So one of the main tools that these beings use is they try to knock you off of your balance. So say if you're making a good decision, I'm gonna start working harder. You know what, I've been too lazy, I'm gonna start working harder. Now, this could be absolutely accurate. This is totally something you need to do. But you have to be aware, because then when you start working harder, there very well might be beings that try to push you too far into that direction, where then you become this workhorse that doesn't stop and you just go way too hard, right? And then you say, oh wow, man, I'm working too hard. I need to chill out and balance out. I need to relax. And so then you start trying to relax, and then there very well might be beings that say, oh man, you need to relax more, stop doing this, stop doing that, to the point where you're kind of giving up on life and push you too far in that direction. And this is very much how it works. It's in a sense kind of like kung fu. If they can't get you to do one particular thing that they want and you start moving more towards balance, then like a kung fu move, they'll take that energy and keep pushing it to the other direction to make you imbalanced on the other side. So it's really important to always have your focus on balance. Really, you just want to get a good sense for what balance is, and then continue to cultivate balance, and beware of extremes. If you get really extreme about anything, then that's not healthy, and you're probably being influenced by some sort of being that is feeding off of the extra energy that you're losing by being too extreme, or feeding off of the energy that you are causing other people to lose through your extreme behavior, or both. Now this gets even deeper and deeper. There's all sorts of different mental twists and manipulations that they can use, and what I would recommend is there's a really good book that I read when I was like 20 years old. It's called The Screwtape Letters. It's by C.S. Lewis, and he has some really good insights in that book. And basically what it is it's a book where there is Uncle Screwtape is the devil, and Wormwood is one of his henchmen, and Wormwood is writing letters back and forth between the devil and himself, and he's asking advice for how to manipulate this particular person that he's working with. So it goes through the story where this person, this human, is making all these decisions in the world, and he's doing good things, or he's getting off track, and it's showing the relationship between Wormwood, the demon, and the human, and how the demon manipulates the human when the human does different things. And it gives a lot of really deep insights for how these kind of manipulations work. Now, on the lighter side, I want to talk about how to connect more with the kinds of beings that are beneficial, the kinds of beings that are in balance. And you do that really in the same way that you would avoid connecting with negative beings. And that is by cultivating a healthy, balanced vibration, right? And you do that by focusing on certain energetic frequencies, focusing on things like gratitude, focusing things like love, focusing on things like balance, like appreciation, all these kinds of things. These vibrations call in beings that are of that same frequency. And then you start harmonizing with them and you start collaborating with them. It's not always super important that you know if it's another being that's communicating with you or not. What's most important is that you know your vibrational sense, right? That you know what your vibrational balance is. Because if you're always focused on, is this a being or not, that can kind of take you out of the flow in your life. What you focus on is if this feels right. And when you learn how to get into a balanced space and what that balanced space feels like, the more you spend time in that balanced space, the more it becomes obvious when something imbalanced comes along. So to connect more with higher beings, you want to focus on high vibration. Now, high vibe is always going to be balanced, meaning you can have feelings that feel like they're high vibe, but are not necessarily balanced. An example of that would be like getting really high on heroin, right? That will feel really high vibe, but it's not balanced because you didn't actually earn it the right way. Another example could be like, it may feel really good to not work at all, but because that's relaxing. But eventually that's not balanced, and it's gonna come back and it's gonna be something that's ultimately destructive later because you're not gonna be able to pay your bills, you're not gonna be able to do anything that you wanna do in life. So you have to be aware of what's balanced and high vibe, because sometimes things that are out of balance might feel very good in the very beginning, but then they turn out to be more painful later on as you continue doing that out of balance thing. So it's not just following pleasure. When I say high vibe, I don't mean just following what feels pleasurable in the moment, because it might raise your vibe in the moment, but it might ultimately still be out of balance. So you want to make sure that high vibe is vibing high, it feels good, but it's also balanced and it's also grounded. You have to have both of those pieces in place. Otherwise, you're going to get off track and you're going to start going down a path that you don't want to go down. Now, how do you become more aware of specific beings when they're communicating with you? That just all comes back to your subtle awarenesses. The more you become aware of how to feel more subtle energies in your body, the more you become capable of turning your mind off and having no thoughts. So meditation, being able to meditate and clear your mind fully, the more aware you will become of different beings communicating with you, in the sense that you'll be able to identify, this is a being that is not me, this is coming from somewhere else. And you do that because when you clear your mind, when you clear your emotions and you're in a very clear space, then you're able to actually see on the subtle realm and feel on the subtle realm the different influences that are coming forward. It's not just a whirlwind of a bunch of emotions and thoughts like you may have in your everyday, walking around space. You actually get so quiet that things come in and you have this perception where you're able to actually see something and see into the nature of what it is that you're experiencing and where it's coming from. So thanks so much for tuning in. This is Patrick Hayes. Like, subscribe, share with your friends. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. If you have any questions or comments, put them in the comments below, and hit the bell button if you haven't hit the bell button, and then you'll be notified every time I release a video. So thanks so much, one love, and I'll talk to you next time.